People have been asking in every live stream, have been commenting on every video, have been in my Discord asking, Chisgule, which should I get? The Silent Trial or Delane's Amulet? So in this video, we'll give you a really detailed answer. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, a sponsored content creator for Rise of Kingdoms, and it is really nice that in the new spring events, you can go in and get a city skin for 100% free. You'll be able to get enough of this spring nectar, and you even have a choice of an accessory. You can use spring nectar to get an accessory choice chest. This is a complete accessory, 30 fragments that you can combine for a complete pattern of either the Silent Trial, Delane's Amulet, or Peter's Sickle. Now, I should have made this video on April 1st and pranked you all saying that you should make Peter's Sickle, because obviously the amount of resources you'll generate over time is going to get you so much value, it's completely out of control. Actually, should I make a Peter's Sickle? Joking aside, there is some real consideration behind the Silent Trial and the Delane's Amulet, so we're going to go point by point, starting with the Silent Trial, then getting into the Delane's Amulet and its virtues, and some of the pros and cons, as well as how you could get these blueprint fragments if you weren't going to make it this time around from this pick chest, and you wanted to go and make it later on. How would you get those fragments? The last thing I'll talk about at the very end of the video is another event that just showed up in Kingdom 2 that is going to give you even more of these spring nectars, and if you're really badass, well, if you pay to win, you can go and get some legendary blueprint fragments as well, or some epic fragments along the way. That'll be at the end of the video. So let's start with the Silent Trial, which is deceptively good. I made a video about this probably a year ago, revealing that although the description says normal attacks can decrease the target's rage by 10 points, it is actually that it will decrease the target's rage by 10 points on every single turn. And it's so good and so powerful that when I did rally testing with Khan and Chandragupta before a KVK, we ran a bunch of tests using Silent Trial, and we ran a bunch of tests using the legendary Pendant of Eternal Night, and guess what? Silent Trial outperformed Pendant of the Eternal Night with the Khan Chandragupta combo, which blew my freaking mind, because yeah, it is way less materials to go make a Silent Trial. Silent Trial is extremely good. However, I want to talk about rage manipulation for just a moment, because when you are manipulating the rage of an enemy, it's either amazing or it's terrible, and that has to do with how rage works in Rise of Kingdoms. You will fire off your active skill when you hit whatever the required amount of rage is to use that active skill. For most commanders, that's 1,000. In fact, if I show you, it'll say on almost every commander what that requirement is, 1,000 rage requirement. Now, if you reduce the enemy's rage generation and it doesn't make it so that they would fire off their skill later, you haven't actually done anything. In other words, if the enemy is generating so much rage that you don't actually influence when they take their turn, then Silent Trial is terrible. But if you do reduce their rage so much that you delay them by even just one turn, then Silent Trial is absolutely phenomenal. And the amount of damage and utility you're cutting from the enemy by making it so they can't use their active skills as fast is really very impressive. Now, it's very hard to predict exactly what those breakpoints are going to be and what an open field combat situation is even going to look like and how much of a difference that is going to make. But one other reason why making the enemy go a turn later is a big deal is that you will do your active skill damage to them, and if you've delayed them a turn, they will deal less damage as well because you have done your damage to them first. They have less troops to do damage with. It's really very strong. And if you were to swarm a target with multiple Silent Trials, in other words, you have 5 marches and every march has a Silent Trial, yes, they will generate more rage typically by virtue of being swarmed, but you can start to rage lock the target even more, which I think is very strong, and really melt them down. This is particularly true in Ark of Osiris for swarming a garrison. That seems extremely strong. It's also super relevant, by the way, for rallies, In particular, actually, I'll say counter rallies and swarming a rally. Let me clarify that. Swarming a rally more than rallies. And the reason that I like that is that when I am trying to dismantle somebody's rally onto a garrison, I want my counter rally, I want the marches I'm swarming with to be as disruptive as possible so that the garrison can either do more damage to the target or take less damage so that the trade is more favorable, it's more positive. Well, Silent Trial is going to reduce the rage of the target, which is really good for hitting a rally. It means that in a worst case, if the target has a bunch of skills that make them generate more rage for being swarmed, then okay, you're at least rage neutral in what you're doing to that target. But in a best case, you're actually slowing them down, which is really quite phenomenal. And I know I'm really singing the praises of Silent Trial. I think it's one of the best epic accessories, but let's not discount for a moment the strengths of the Delane's Amulet. The Delane's Amulet is reducing the counterattack damage you are taking. It is improving your tankiness in an interesting way. It does not do anything when somebody else is hitting you. That's not where this helps. This helps when you are hitting someone. You have to be hitting a target with your attacks in order to benefit from this at all, because when you hit something, you take counterattack damage. This will reduce the counterattack damage that you are taking. This turns out to be really good against targets that don't do any skill damage, like Richard I and Charles Martel, because all of the damage you are taking is in the form of normal attacks. That is, them attacking you, and because you're hitting them doing some counterattack damage back. That is really powerful in that context. It's also good in the open field when you're hitting people that aren't going to hit you back. It gives you a lot of sustain, especially if you can avoid taking skill damage. And it is very meaningful for your survivability. And it's even more crazy, by the way, on commanders that do lots of healing. For instance, Takeda does a lot of healing. Richard I does a lot of healing. You can reach a point where you have sort of infinite sustain by virtue of elevating your tankiness a whole heck of a lot. One other area I'm going to mention, the Delane's Amulet being really strong, is for both multi-rallies and counter-rallies. If you are multi-rallying a target and the second rally in, the one not taking the basic attacks, the normal attacks from the garrison, you are going to be reducing your damage very substantially. And I get that in this day and age, most garrison commanders do area of effect damage with skill damage, so Delane's Amulet has lost some of its luster. But back in the day, when the garrison was Charles Martel and Constantine, yeah, it was really good for the second rally in to be reducing the counterattack damage they were taking, because that was the only damage the counter rally was taking. That's a big, big deal. I also really like this on counter rallies to improve the survivability of your counter rally, but as I mentioned earlier, I would much prefer if the counter rally is doing things to dismantle the rally rather than protect itself. In other words, I want all the optimization to be around the garrison rather than the counter rally itself, because the counter rally just exists to protect the garrison. If the counter rally's trades are not so positive, it's not so important, that's not where the dead troops are happening. Make sense? Now, there is one other very important consideration between the Delane's Amulet and the Silent Trial, which is how the heck do you obtain these things? And there is actually a clean answer for that. If you wanted to get a Silent Trial, you would need to run around to barbarian camps. The barbarian camps have a little yellow marker. You saw when I zoomed out, I could use a filter to showcase where these are. These spawn roughly every 8 hours, and it takes an eternity of walking around to find these darn things to get the job done. It is a true pain in the butt. It also takes a while to get a Delane's Amulet. However, it can be a little bit easier to go and get a Delane's Amulet because you can get multiple fragments to drop when you go and you battle a Barbarian Keep. Barbarian Keeps can drop a whole bunch of Delane's Amulets on the ground, which is really nice. You can see in the chest over here, they drop multiple of either the Dark Lord's Blessing or the Delane's Amulet. And in KVK, those drop rates actually used to change. Now it's just got a higher number of items here, it looks like, for the higher level of the Barbarian Keep. These levels are, of course, only available at the top end in KVK itself. And Swindler Dollaruk is a special spawn. He does not drop any of the Delane's Amulet. This is where he'll drop Pendant of Eternal Night, which is also nice, but I don't think Pendant of Eternal Night is actually like all that amazing until you start doing tons of skill damage with multiple commanders doing AoE. That's kind of a separate idea I won't cover in this video. What I'll say in summary is that between the two, the Delane's Amulet is easier to get than the Silent Trial. If I'm putting my money where my mouth is, you can see I've got 3 Silent Trials and 2 Delane's Amulets, and I would even consider reducing another Delane's Amulet potentially and doing another Silent Trial. I'll say that for a spender, I mean, the long-term goal is to get some legendaries to replace some of this stuff anyways, but I do like, especially in a world with 7 marches, can you imagine? I don't actually think you should put the Silent Trial on all 7 marches, but reducing the rage of the enemy by 70 a turn, I mean, it seems pretty good, although you have to account for the fact, and a huge thank you to Thug Lightyears for sending me this battle report. Let me pull this up real quick. Here you're looking at a report of Attila Takeda battling against Ramses and Esong. And unintentionally, I didn't tell them to go and use a Silent Trial. They actually do have a Silent Trial here on the Ramses. You can see Silent Trial is reducing the rage by 10 of the Attila, but the Attila has talents that give him rage every time he's hit by an enemy. So some commanders, particularly the ones with the attack tree, the defense tree, are going to generate tons of rage. Maybe even the leadership tree has this. Tons of rage for every time they're attacked. So, yeah, you know, you will sort of control their rage, but in many ways, you're almost sort of going rage neutral. And I will mention that with the special talent, oh my gosh. I mean, you go from reducing the rage by 10 per second to 13 per second, which is so good. Obviously, you can see I have a sort of love for the Silent Trial here, and between the two, I would recommend the Silent Trial, although other folks might say that for small skirmishes in the open field, where you're not going to be firing off the active skill a whole heck of a lot, or at all, then Delane's Amulet's really good and gives you immediate benefit. I'll show you in this particular report that I would argue, by virtue of having the Silent Trial, look at that. Attila doesn't even fire off his skill until turn 12. Ooh. I mean, I think they've reduced the active skill cycle by at least 1 turn. At least 1 turn in this battle log, which is really very strong. And they were generating so much rage. Man, they fired off their first skill on turn 9. Pretty good. In fact, comedically, I think that the Ramses is using both the Silent Trial and the Delane's Amulet. I think that's where the minus 5% counterattack damage taken is coming from. I think that's the Delane's, and in fact, it has to be. So in summary, my personal preference here is going to be the Silent Trial, followed by the Delane's. That's my preference. I know not everybody would agree with that necessarily, but let me show you the event that's in Kingdom 2 right now that is going to give you even more of the currency you need to actually obtain the pattern in the first place. Here we are in Kingdom 2, and a huge thank you again to Kingdom 2 for hosting me in your kingdom, allowing me to be in one of the main alliances. I do my donations, I swear. But thank you for giving me a good opportunity to showcase stuff like this in your kingdom. Protect the supplies. This is an individual event where you control the difficulty of the event, and it's going to give you some more water. I assume that this is going to show up in every kingdom in a couple days, and the premium rewards are definitely premium. So there are tiered rewards available for completing a certain number of stars, and there are also ranked rewards. This is what I was alluding to at the beginning. If we look at the ranked rewards, boom, it is the Commander's Boots Blueprint Fragments, and 30 of them if you get first, which is pretty impressive. If you're the first person to get this done, then you get first place. You have to get the max number of stars, which means you might want to use an army expansion, but if you're in KVK right now, like we are, this is actually probably a whole heck of a lot easier to get the max number of stars, and this is actually, if I remember correctly, a pretty tough event to go and knock out. Folks have already done that, however, in Kingdom 2, there are 3 people who did that at 100% completion, which is pretty impressive here, and I mention this because You're going to have to move fast. Unless they change the way this works, first person in gets first place. So as soon as reset rolls around, when this event is here, you should have your marches on the field, rune in hand, army expansion already used. There's even strategic positioning you could put yourself in, theoretically, on the map. I don't know exactly how that goes. You try to control the flow of the baddies. And, man, try to get that max score. That way you can go in and get all those sweet fragments. Now, I personally am not so sure I would make this item. I mean, attack is fine. It gives you a speedier kill, but it's not the most efficient stat, especially since we're now living in a world in which you get 50+% of attack stats in the Season of Conquest KVK when you're maxing out your tech. So this is a pattern I don't think is particularly exciting, but when we scroll down a bunch, there are some epic fragments down here, some epic chests that seem pretty cool. Even in, you get in the top 100, you get 5 of them and 100 gems. You know, aim in this realm, and that'll probably be good enough. If you enjoyed this video, do me a huge favor, throw a like on here. Consider subscribing if you got value out of this. Throw that like on here. And let me know down below in the comments which of the accessories you will be choosing from the springtime events. I'm leaning toward that silent trial, personally. That seems like a really solid pickup. I've probably got more than enough potatoes to get that job done, but inside jokes aside, I'll see you in the next one.